Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So welcome. Thank you all. Wait, am I supposed to wait for you to introduce me, Kelsey?
No, go right ahead.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. This is Advance Your Research on secondary data sources. We are focusing today on the retrieval and use parts. I am going to dock the chat on my other screen. So if I look like I'm looking over your heads, I'm checking to see if anyone has said anything in the chat. We're going to talk about the more technical aspects of secondary data use, how to find it in a data search without having to get into the fancy parts, and how to pull it down or download it, extract it from its hiding place in the zip file, and then upload it onto app2go. And I'm Nyan Exner. I am your research data librarian, which means that I work with all the parts of the data lifecycle except the fun stuff of collection and analysis. So I do all of the boring stuff that people don't really think of a lot, like getting data to a sharing point, or giving it a good description, helping people find it once it's been shared, cleaning and transformations to a certain extent, and documenting things so that you can reuse your data in the future. So I am not a statistician. If you need one, pull out your phone and take a picture of the screen, although these slides will be shared, and try either the Stat Consult service or the Biostat Consult service. Those, either of those in the highlighted yellow will be more to the point. If what you need to do is, I need to know the right power analysis and how to do a rank order, whatever test. I'm a data librarian, which is a sort of peculiar job, and I'm also a researcher. I do mixed methods research. I serve the Monroe Park and MCV campuses, and you can email me directly at nexner@vcu.edu or at libdatahelp@vcu.edu. That's actually going to get to me, but if you ever don't get an answer from me, you can also try the libdatahelp, and it gets to a few other people as well. In the past, last year, I talked about data searching before, and it was more focused on the conceptual parts of operationalization and the recursive process of sort of aligning the research question you want to ask with the data that is available for you to analyze. And so if you want to do that, you should have already gotten an email about it, but just in case you didn't, you can go to the AYR past events website and look for the recording of the data searching webinar. It will have some overlap with this one, but it has a slightly different focus. And Kelsey is also putting information, thank you very much, into the chat box so that you can click or copy and paste. So we're really going to focus today on getting the data out of the database and then getting it into SPSS. I'm going to do SPSS through the app2go, although just like I'm not a statistician, I'm also not part of technology services. And so if you have app2go trouble, and app2go is very, very troublesome. If you're having trouble with app2go, you definitely want to talk to the app2go techs. You can go to the Cabell Library lower level or any other of the help desks and ask them, or you can submit a ticket. And there's also a good amount of frequently asked questions on the link on this page. There's a lot of different places to find data, and different people mean different things when they're talking about finding data. I'm going to give you some of the most common ones here. A lot of data is actually public, especially data that's not sort of about people's personal experiences, but more towards social experiences. The census data, which includes a vast array of sort of general societal tracking, things about income and poverty and housing and employment and unemployment rates and ethnicity and citizenship and current enrollment in school, highest grades graduated from, I mean, all different kinds of things can be gotten from the census. And if you don't need to run a regression or some original statistical analysis, if you just want a crosstab, that is to say one of those charts where you've got maybe men and women, biracial groups and then their highest educational achievement or something like that. If you just want one of those and it just gives the numbers of all these different categories, you can actually run that on the data.census.gov MDAT website. There's also a lot of government data sets at the data.gov portal. It's still a really rotten interface to search. I'm sorry, the government is protecting the taxpayer dollars, but not exactly trying to get us the best interface we could possibly get. So there's lots of great data sets for exploration there at the data.gov website. And then on our guides to statistics, there's a mix of things we subscribe to and some free data sources. Typically, when people ask me to help them find data, it's a 50-50-ish shot whether it ends up being something that they could have found online, although searching for data is really hard. But I assume if you have a current data interest that you've already tried Googling for it and searching for your data. I will say that usually the problem is operationalizing constructs. If people are searching for data and they can't find anything, there's nothing out there, but surely someone has looked for this. So surely someone has studied this. In my experience, the problem is that the way that other people have operationalized their constructs and then how they've named them don't match up with your concept exactly of how to operationalize that concept. But maybe it's different, but not as different, not so different that it would block you from doing the research. But we're really kind of not focusing on that part, focusing on getting to the data. Show me how to get some data down and then put it in SPSS. Just show me that. So here are some of the subscription examples that you can use through the library. There is ICPSR, and that's the one that I end up using the most. It's got the broadest range of topics, and it's the one I'm going to demonstrate here. We also have one called Sociometrics. It tends to be a little bit older, but it's got some good health data in there. The Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse, which focuses on government transactions. The Wharton Research Data Services, which has a huge amount of really valuable business data. If you're not already using Words, you should sign up for a Words account if you're in business. And then if you want to know, maybe you want to explore data sets to get ideas of what you could be publishing on or could be using secondary data. So some of these really big data sets have hundreds or even thousands of variables. And there's so many variables that no one kind of knows them all except for the statisticians and data managers that clean the variables. And in those cases, the most highly ones may float to the top of the data citation index. So very highly cited, widely used data sets could be identified through that data citation index, and then you could explore and see whether we have access to the data sets. ICPSR is so popular for a few different reasons. One is that it's got a lot of topics. Another is that it's widely respected for its strong preservation and documentation arrangements. And a lot of government niche, smaller niche than the census, such as NIH subject repositories, specialized disciplinary repositories. A lot of those use the ICPSR interface, even though they're public and not through the subscription version. So anyone can get those because it's got such a strong preservation and documentation practice. And for a data search environment, it's relatively clear to use. Now, I'm saying that for a data search environment because, data search is just a pain in the. There's nothing that makes it easy. Even people who've been doing data for a long time have trouble finding data. A lot of times people will get very used to one large data set and just concentrate on that one data set because it's so hard to explore existing data. So if you feel like it's been hard or you're not sure and that makes you feel a little embarrassed, like other people can do this, why can't I? Other people can't do it. It's actually pretty tough. But ICPSR is one of the easier to use. I will try to do a live example, but live examples are prone to go wrong. So I'm going to give you the overview and walk through by slides first, and then I'll do the live example, and we'll see how it manages to embarrass me by blowing up. First, you start at ICPSR and you put in a topic. There are a lot of menus underneath the search box, where if you want to maybe browse for data or look for topics, or if you're an instructor and you want to look for teaching packages, there's a lot of content in there other than just the searchable data. And I think if you go to the ICPSR guide on the library website, then you can see an old, I think there's an old couple of years old video that was recorded and got linked there. I think it's linked there. If not, it probably will be soon as I go try to find it. Once you've put in a topic, on the left-hand side, it's going to give you a lot of options. Now, data comes with a lot of different licenses because there are different levels of sensitivity of the data. And I mean, in terms of ethical or privacy sensitivity. You've probably thought of that as a researcher in terms of the IRB, and the IRB gives you a lot of guidance and help on how to protect your participants. Oftentimes there's extremely private data that is never shared or can only be shared by directly emailing the PI or researcher that collected the data and asking them to share it with you as a collaborator directly. There's openly available data that you just have to attest that you are a legitimate researcher and you have a research interest, and you will not use the data for anything other than research purposes. You won't use it to try to locate information on whether the one Korean American in Iowa is actually a Christian or is I don't know, has converted to Judaism, or whether a certain ethnic group has in your city has a high rate of HIV, or I don't know, you won't use it for some embarrassing or harassing or other illegitimate purpose. And so that's the very public. There's some in between where you have to fill out a form to get permission. So it's restricted. You can't just download it directly, but it's not a highly restricted private environment where you have to do some complicated extra hoops to get to the data. And to check whether it's the just sign that you're not going to do something harassing with it, versus you have to fill out a form and wait a few days before you can really see the data, or possibly you have to have an IRB already. The restriction type on the left helps you pick whether that's the public data or the restricted data. Since we're talking about SPSS, although you may be more interested in another analytical environment, there's also a data format on the left. You may want to open the data in Excel, and I will certainly try to help you with that if you want to set up a consult for it, but I highly recommend using something other than Excel if you have any familiarity at all, because in Excel, data doesn't have any labels necessarily, so you're going to get 1 or 2 not inpatient or outpatient. In SPSS, you can toggle between 1 equals inpatient, 2 equals outpatient. But in Excel, you're just going to get the 1, and then you have to go over and look up, okay, what does 1 equal? 1 equals inpatient. So it's much more awkward to work with these big data sets. So you want to use the menus on the left after you've put in your topic to restrict. Some of the most popular ones are the public use restriction type, the data format SPSS, although I'd like to mention, if you look at that data format drop-down box, the online analysis will let you run crosstabs and even get a p-value, a basic p-value for sort of a t-test, ANOVA, or chi-square level of precision, maybe a simple regression, but it won't get too complicated. But you can do it online without having to download and without having to put the data into SPSS and without having to transform it yourself. So that online analysis is pretty spiffy for the things that have it. On the right, you can see that some other options you would get in the menu, in the limiting menus, are time period. I will warn you that getting data from like the last 2 or 3 years is going to be pretty difficult. So if you have a very specific research topic, or even a moderately specific research topic, and you want very up-to-date data, you may be out of luck. It's worth checking, but lots of topics where you really have to dig in, like exactly what mental health modality of treatment is being used in a certain environment and how are the outcomes to that treatment. That's not going to be something you're going to get in like 2018, 2019 data. It's just not going to happen. Only sort of broad, constantly collected social phenomena like race, ethnicity, poverty, employment, unemployment, education, those kinds of things that everyone is always engaged in some way. Only those come out on a every year or couple of years basis. Data availability, funding agency, those are a little bit more niche. Time method, if you're looking for longitudinal studies are relatively rare, but this is definitely the place to find them. So there are a lot of ways to limit your data searching. Once you've limited and you've found a data set, this is the page for a data set. The data set that I've pulled up here is the Survey of Public Participation in the Arts. And it has an ICPSR number, which you can just put that number into the search box to get directly back to this exact data set. There are a series of tabs in the red box here. There's the At a Glance tab, which gives you a sort of abstract of the data set. The Data and Documentation and Variables tabs are really helpful for exploring whether the data set is going to have what you want. So I searched for dance, but dance could pull up a lot of different topics. So I can look here in the variables or download the code book to find out what is said about dance. Is this watching dance? Is this doing dance? Is it specific types of dance? So the details will come up looking through the variables, and understanding whether those variable definitions are what you want is very important, especially since knowing whether it's going to be a categorical or a nominal variable, or it's going to be continuous, a ratio or interval variable. That's going to have a big effect on what kind of analysis you can easily do with it, depending on your statistical chops. And then you see there's the analyze online if you want to try to go ahead and run a crosstab, maybe get a p-value online in the database without downloading. So that's the important section. Most of the rest of the screen is going to be a little less important. Although please always remember that you should cite data sets in your references list or works cited list. Don't just name it in the text of your methods paper, method section. Downloading the PDF of the documentation, if you think you may actually analyze the data, is going to be really important, because you probably will have to refer to that documentation at some point. If you've decided you want to download it, the download button is right there. It'll show you all the different formats that you can download in. This one has a good range of different formats. So you can pull it in Stata or Spss. You can pull it in an optimized for R format, or you can pull it in tab delimited if you want it just as a TSV file. And then there's an ASCII and Excel. So there's a lot of different formats for this one. They've really done a good job with setting this out. And you can kind of tell that it's a census run operation. Once you try to download, it will ask you to agree to the terms of use. If it's public, you still have to agree to the public license, which is to say that you attest that you're using this for research topics, research purposes. You won't try to reveal any of the individual people's identities. You won't use it for any kind of crimes or problems. You'll let them know if you find that the data does reveal anyone's identity. You won't share the data further on. Your redistribution will look slightly different than mine will. And that you will try to reference the data, because that's how the people who share data then get funding for the next time. And it'll ask you to agree. If you've never used ICPSR, you'll need to create an account. You can either create an account with the My Data on the left, or you can use the Google button to sign in with your EID if you've got the Google accounts. VCU Health, I haven't tried that. I'm not sure if you're on the VCU Health email, how that's going to behave exactly. Then it'll tell you your download will begin shortly, and it'll probably take a bit. If you're in Chrome, you'll get the popping to the bottom circle. It is probably not going to help to just click on that. If you're on a Mac, it might, although it'll probably be confusing. If you're on a Windows machine, it almost definitely will not be helpful to just click on that. But that's where your download has happened, is down there. The reason I say that it won't help to just click on it is you need to unzip the files or extract the files. When you download a data package, you're downloading a lot of files together. So you're downloading some PDFs and some lists of citations, and you're downloading the code books. And so you've got a lot of different stuff. And so to make it take up less time in the download, and to be able to keep all the stuff together, they zip it into a single file called a zip file. But you can't open the zip file in SPSS or in Stata or anything else. So you have to unzip all of the files in order to find the .sav file that you would open in SPSS. This is a little easier on a Mac than it is on a Windows machine. In Mac, go in Finder to where the file is and open it and just double click and it will unzip it. And you'll see, like you have here, the normal Finder hierarchy. And this shows that this had 8 or 9 files inside of that zip file once I unzip it. In Windows, it's a little harder. You need to find where it downloaded. So go to your downloads folder, and then you need to right click on it. And from the pop-up menu, you need to choose extract all. And my intention is to show you that when I do my live demo. So I'm on my Dell machine. Inside of that folder that unzips, there will be another folder that's usually DS0001. It could have a 001, a 002, and a 003, depending on the data that you pick. But the most common is to have a folder called this, DS0001. And if you open that folder, inside your folder that says ICPSR, you will finally find the actual SPSS file that you can open in SPSS. So you have to have unzipped that zip, not just be able to see this data.save. In Windows, you can see it without actually having unzipped it, which is very confusing. In Mac, typically it will try to unzip it automatically, but Windows machines, just because you can see it doesn't mean it's been unzipped. SPSS can't open it unless it's got this, the folder symbol next to it. If it's got the symbol with the little line down the middle, which is a tiny, tiny zipper, then it's not going to be able to pull that SAV file. So once you have unzipped your file, which sounds a little weird, you can go to SPSS. Now, if you have a full installation of SPSS, that maybe you've gone to the TS, Technology Services pages, to install SPSS directly on your computer, you probably can double click on the SAV file and it will open. But if you're using the app-to-go system, which is the harder approach, which is why I'm going to try to demonstrate it, the app-to-go system, you will have to open SPSS on app-to-go and then open your SAV file from inside the app-to-go SPSS. If you're using app-to-go, you need to log in to app-to-go on the website. And then once you've downloaded the website version of app-to-go, you'll need to go to the upper right corner and find your name and click on it and activate, which will then install a program called Citrix Receiver, and you can launch from there. If you don't do that, it's just never going to find the file that you've downloaded. Honestly, the SPSS direct download and full install is a better choice, but a lot of people have trouble activating it, especially if you're not physically on campus right now due to social distancing. App-to-go looks like this. Also, if you need to use a lot of these, for example, if you, like me, use mixed methods research and you want to be able to use in vivo as well as SPSS, then you may want to learn how to use app-to-go anyway. App-to-go looks like this. We go to SPSS and it will bring up a page with your recent files and new data set and open another file. And you can go from there to find where you unzipped your data. If you don't see your desktop folders here, well, you're in app to go. You may need to exit, reboot, and make sure that you've logged into app to go through the Citrix receiver and not through the website. And then if it still doesn't work, ask technology services why your app to go isn't working, because it's a huge pain. They hopefully, there's a lot of stuff that they can check about how the Citrix environment, the app to go virtualization environment that lets it work on your machine without having to install all of that software all at the same time. There's a lot of stuff they can do to check what about the compatibility with your computer. And I don't know how to do any of that stuff. If you're still learning SPSS, there's a couple of main places where we run into problems the first few times that someone tries to use SPSS. I'm not a SPSS trainer. I can't give you advanced help with it, but some of the basics that you may need to know if you're just now trying to muddle your way through SPSS, especially if you're trying to do it based on like one class session orientation and then a bunch of YouTube videos. In the bottom left, under my Google Slides pop-up, go away. In this bottom left, in the red oval square thing, you'll see that there's two tabs, and both of these tabs are important. The variable view lists all of your variables by name, tells you what type they are, how wide and how many decimal places in the display, not super useful. And then the label, which is the plain language of what that variable means. So for example, you can see HR month is the variable code for the third variable, and then the month the interview was held is the label in sort of plain English. The data view is where you see the actual data. So you work with the variables and their values and labels and encoding in the variable view. You switch to the data view to see the case by case, person by person microdata or response level data. But you have to flip back and forth between the two typically to really get a good feel for the data. Once you've downloaded the data and you've checked to make sure that there's actually data there and it looks okay, typically we spend a lot of time munging data. When data scientists tell jokes, believe it or not, data scientists and statisticians and all can tell jokes. When data scientists get together and tell jokes, they have things like percentage of time developing research question, percentage of time munging the data. The cleaning and transformation and other munging, which is not a real word, but it's the slang that we use for changing the data around and fixing problems with the data, is really the biggest part of data work, especially secondary data. Some really common cleaning things that you might need to know. If your test won't run, you tell it to do a t-test and it either just gives you an error or more likely it gives you an impossible result. Check the variable and impossible results. I mean things like p equals 1, not a decimal, but just 1. And yes, thank you, Kelsey. There's a lot of great SPSS tutorials to walk through in the LinkedIn Learning, which is better than just random YouTube channels by a long shot. So test won't run or it gives you an impossible result. Check to make sure your variables are the right types of measures. I'm going to go up a slide, 2 slides, I'm sorry. In the variable view, towards the right here, you can see some things are set to scale and some are set to nominal. Going back down 2 slides. You want to make sure that you have scale for interval and ratio, ordinal for ordinal, or you can set ordinals to categorical, and categorical or nominal, depending on which version of SPSS you're using for the ordinal and nominal ones. If you have a categorical or nominal set to scale, and sometimes things come down wrong when we download them, it will try to treat 1 for outpatient as a value of 1 and 2 for inpatient as a value of 2. And while we could argue that an inpatient has more admission than an outpatient has, we're really not talking about it in the way that, like, I have twice as much admission as a 2 that I have as a 1 kind of thing. So if the variable measure types aren't set, that's usually the thing that causes tests to bark the most. The other most common, almost all of the cleaning approaches are in the transform menu. The most common one that I know of is if you're calculating a scale, that is to say, you've got responses to all of the questions in the Beck Depression inventory, and you need to calculate the total score for the Beck Depression inventory, but it's not there, just the individual questions. The compute variable under the transform menu is where you want to do that. So those are the 2 most common cleaning questions that I get. Too much detail into that. Again, I'm not an SPSS expert, and so yeah, that's almost the limit of what I can really do. I really can't help once you get to running the tests. There's also a bazillion different options in Analyze and no rhyme or reason to where the tests are at. So just Google where your test is. Don't go through the Analyze menu trying to find it. You will never figure out the logic of how they decided to put things. This one is under compare means, that one's under regression. This one over here is under legacy dialogues. I don't even know what a legacy dialogue is. I mean, I do, but why is this one under legacy dialogues? I don't know. It can help to have that PDF of the codebook that I mentioned with the names of all the variables, because in some views, you have the short version that's like HUBUSL, and in other ones, you have the long version that gives the whole phrasing. If you've never used SPSS before, there's going to be this output window that will pop up, and that means that SPSS is doing its best. It's working on it. It's thinking about it. And usually the results will pop up looking something like this. In this case, I have a cross tabulation and a Fisher's exact. And if you don't know how to read these, you are not alone. The output is another of those things that you may end up wanting to Google about. It'll give you a lot of things that you may not need or want along with the things that you do want. So for example, all I wanted was the Fisher's exact for my 2x2, but I also got a continuity correction, whatever that is, and linear by linear association. I don't know what that is either. Do I need to know? I don't know. That's part of why I'm not a statistician and why I say don't ask me for statistics answers, because I don't know if I should have known these things. As a data librarian, I do have to put in a plug to please try to manage your data. Don't just run it and copy and paste some stuff into your paper and then submit your paper and boom, we're done. If you make a habit of just doing things as fast and basically as possible, sooner or later you'll regret it. Sort of like sooner or later you'll regret not saving frequently in your files. Sooner or later a computer will crash and you'll lose a file if you just keep typing and you don't stop to save every now and then. The same is true for data. So even if you're sure, all you have to do is write and paste one table in, and you're sure you're done with it. You're never going to need to open that data again. Please save your SPSS file anyway. You might discover that you have to reformat your table to APA style tables. And although you wouldn't need to do the statistics again, you'll have, if you didn't save the whole SPSS process, you may end up having to do all of the analysis part again. So if you save it, just save it, stick it on a flash drive, or email it to yourself and take it to you just in case. Then you'll have it in case you need it. You can always delete it in a year or something. But it's very tempting to say, okay, I got my result. I'm just going to put this in my Word document and go. Also, if you're one of the people who's sitting here going like, I already knew most of that. Why am I here even? I knew most of this stuff. This was too basic. Level up by getting a little more reproducible. When you start doing your SPSS, go to the syntax window and open it. Do the rest of your work the way you normally would, and then at the end, save your syntax window content. That way, and back up that syntax script along with the data you downloaded and your final data after any transformations and analyses, and a quick note to yourself about why you did the analysis. Then your whole study, your raw data, your final data, your syntax script if you want to reproduce the whole process, and a note to remind yourself what was going on with it is all there in case 2 years from now you say, hey, you know, I did a study on this topic a couple of years ago. I really should see if I can get back to that. So that would make your data more reproducible, more reusable, more of a gift to yourself in the future. All right, that's my obligatory data manager talk. I have to put it in there. I have to put a plug in for reproducibility. And I'm happy to do consultations on finding data, managing your data. I'm happy to do workshops on reproducibility and data sharing in your lab or whatever. Now I'm going to stop and check the chat and see. Okay, there's no questions for clarification at this time, but go ahead and that wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't want to stop sharing my screen. I wanted to stop presenting. Go ahead and put questions in chat or ask me questions if you want while I fiddle around trying to get out of my slideshow. Ooh, a lot of people decided to leave. Oh,
Oh, no,
well,
it's okay. I had a few message me saying that they had other things to go to, but.
Right, it's just turned into a constant meeting after meeting after meeting,
Yeah.
Zoom all day, every day.
And a 10-minute warning for you, Nina.
And I'm hoping to be just that fast. I'll do dance again. The topic kind of doesn't matter at this point. Again, if you want to hear more about topics and working with your data, see my last year's talk. So I'm limiting to public use data, and I'm limiting to data I can get from SPSS or get into SPSS, and I'm limiting to time period, not release date and not time method, time period. I'll do 2015, and I'll hope. I usually start with the last 5 or 6 years and then the last 10 years and sort of work my way back to longer and longer options. And I'll just do the first one that comes up in the interest of time. if you want to download all of the documentation, you can do that here. Or if you want to look at the variables to see, all right, so what does it say about dance? Come on. There we go. You can do that in these tabs. So the questions that I have to work with about dance here are, did I do any social dancing? Did my spouse do any social dancing? Did I perform or practice any dance? And did my spouse perform or practice any dance? So this is really people's arts activities in these cases. So I have to stop and think, is that what I wanted? There's another survey that talks about people watching specific different kinds of arts. And so that would be a different way of operationalizing the data. I'm right. Download SPSS. I swear I've read this before. I'm just not reading it today. These are mostly pretty big files. They're, even though they're plainish text, they take a few seconds to come down, sometimes even a few minutes. Now, instead of clicking on it directly, and notice that I'm on a Windows machine right now, I'm going to show in folder. If I was on a Mac, it would say show in Finder. And that will bring up a folder view of my file. I'm going to drag it to my desktop. I'm hoping you can see my desktop behind my window. I'm going to right click on it. So I'll use the mouse button that you usually don't use, and I'm going to extract all. And then I'm going to tell it, yes, please extract it. So now it's on my desktop somewhere up here. Yes. And I can look through it until I find the SAV file. This is the file that's the actual data, but you see that I had to do a lot of clicking to get down to it. That's a little less obvious in Mac. Mac's a little bit more like throws everything you at once, everything at you at once, I mean. Whereas if you're in Windows, you open it and you're still like, okay, I don't even know what I'm looking at. And I still don't know what I'm looking at. And I still don't know what I'm looking at. Wait, finally, actual data.sav file. And that's the file that I need for SPSS. Now, if I had SPSS installed and currently active on this computer, I could just double click on this to open it, but I can't to open it in app2go. I have already installed and activated app2go on my computer. And so I have this Citrix receiver. I can't search for app2go. It's going to be called Citrix receiver when I'm searching for it in my computer. So it's this little bullseye symbol. It's a little slow to launch, of course. Now I've probably accidentally launched it twice. It looks very similar to if I go to the website version of app2go, but if I'm just going through the browser, like if I've got the browser tabs up at the top instead of the bar that says Citrix receiver up here, if I've got the URL and the tabs and so on at the top, it's not going to be able to find my folders correctly. All right, so I'm going to apps, I'm going to SPSS, and I'm going to let app2go open my SPSS, and it's going to ask me to log in again for the 15th time today. And I need to have my phone with me because it's going to send me a duo push any minute. Any minute. I swear I did not say amen, although the captions imply that I did. Why are you not doing this? Doing it right? Come on, send me a push. Did not start app. Oh, of course it's gonna decide to work up now. I swear I tested
Hey.
this twice this morning.
We're just checking people's expectations for using this, right?
Too right. I might give an amen if it decides to behave itself. While it's loading, and while you're probably fast forwarding if you're watching the recorded version of this, I will be happy to work with you about sort of brainstorming your operationalization and come on. Brainstorming your operationalization, exploring variables, and other stuff to try to find some sort of secondary data that'll fit your question. That can be tough, but I'm happy to do it. And if you're interested in reproducibility, rigor and reproducibility, or the robustness of why are you asking me twice, Push? App2Go keeps sending my Duo, you know, the thing where you have to approve your email. You also have to approve every time you go into App2Go. It keeps sending multiple requests, so I think it's just going to tell us to go to HE double toothpicks. So I'm sorry, I can't actually go into App2Go, but once you launch SPSS from there, it's going to have on the left-hand side of the screen, like I showed in the slides, it'll have the option to open another file. And that's when you'll navigate to the place wherever you've put that folder, maybe in your downloads, or maybe like me, you moved it to your desktop and find this data.sav. So you do need to know where it's at. It's one of the problems with working with App2Go is you can't just kind of click and everything opens like an installed application. You have to actually look and see, okay, is this in my downloads folder, my documents folder, my desktop folder, and find where it's at. All right. I'm happy to take appointments. If you have questions, hopefully I'll try to record another live version and add it as a supplement for the last few steps here. And I'll send that to you later. Thank you all for joining me. Let's stop the recording.